So just to get started, Gary, it'd be really cool to understand what your role is, but could you describe your role currently and what you do as though I'm a 5-year-old?
Yeah, no, when you prompted me for this was a great question. And I said to my wife last night, I need to explain this as if you're a 5-year-old. So I explained it and she said, I'm a 50-year-old and I don't understand it. That's like, right, okay.
Oh, I love that.
Let me try that again then. I work in the procurement department at John Lewis Partnership. And John Lewis Partnership consists of Waitrose and John Lewis. And when you buy something in the shop, when you buy your toy in the shop, your mum will pay at the till. The people working there will be wearing uniform. You might need a bag for the toy that you bought. So the procurement team's job is to buy these things from other companies so that the shop can use them. Procurement makes sure they are available when you need them, so the shop can use them. Procurement also makes sure the people who produce those items are treated fairly, have been paid fairly, have good working conditions, and also procurement makes sure that John Lewis are paying the right price for those, so it doesn't cost you more as the customer. My team in procurement is responsible for developing the tools and giving people the education to how to use those tools, and really teaching people the importance as well of all those things, of making sure that we get the right price, but also we have the right conditions for workers. We're considering the planet as well. And also making sure that we're building good relationships with the companies that we buy from.
So Gary, we're going to dive into sort of the meat of this podcast now. So we're going to be talking about rebranding procurement. And I'm just going to put a slight caveat here. I have absolutely no idea how this is going to go. Like I'm really excited to hear your thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts on this and I'm going to kind of keep them. I'm going to try and be quiet as much as possible here, let you talk. But maybe we'll start off with this reimagining procurement in this way as to why it may be necessary to rebrand procurement.
Yeah, feel free to join in, because I think it's a conversation we need to have rather. I mean, I'm not going to say I've got the answers. It's just very much like you. It's a thought that I'm having of, what is procurement now? What does it need to be in the future? So my thoughts are like procurement needs to evolve because times are changing and expectations are changing. Technology is changing. Everything around us is changing at a pace that we've never seen before.
Never seen, right? It feels like every 3 months there's a life-changing technology moment over the last year, and I don't think we can even keep up mentally. We're aware of the vast changes that are happening right now.
Yeah, and change, but also environmental changes. What's going on around us in the world. That's sort of there's just stuff happening all the time, and because of social media, etc., we're much more clued in to things now as well, aren't we? It's sort of like it's instant.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't take time for news to filter through. It's happening there and then in front of you, isn't it? When events are happening,
everything's real time, right? Especially with platforms like Twitter, which have effectively changed the media, the way in which we consume, I guess, news in terms of that kind of media. You can find out anything that's happening around the world in any location in real time, and that's never. It's scary. It's wonderful, but I think we were just talking about LinkedIn and content on there. It's the same kind of happening on there as well. Real time commentary around events, whether it's business, environment, sustainability, news. It's all there.
I don't think procurement's in a kind of do or die situation. I don't think it's like change now or procurement won't exist. But I do think we need to realign ourselves as to what we are. What does procurement offer? Because, you say, talk about LinkedIn, see a lot of great posts on LinkedIn, from yourself, Tom Mills, Dave Jones, others, talking about procurement and dinosaurs.
I have a slightly more extreme view than you on this, that's for sure. And not than most people.
So as procurement dinosaurs, we're waiting for the meteor to strike. What I would say is, there's some really great conversations happen on LinkedIn. And we say, procurement professionals are saying we're more than cost savings. We're about risk management, relationship builders, we're the brand custodians, putting ourselves forward as the enablers of the business. Procurement people being critical thinkers. Big statements around how much we care about sustainability, diversity, human rights. And also this entrepreneurial aspect to it. And you're seeing a lot more of that with procurement professionals now, sort of like actively being entrepreneurs, setting up their own businesses, but also talking with an entrepreneurial spirit. So that's kind of the conversation which is happening in procurement circles. But when procurement talks to the paymaster.
Yeah. It's a very different conversation.
It's a different conversation, isn't it?
So true. Yeah. No, it certainly is.
A lot of procurement teams report into the CFO. And what's the CFO's focus? It's finance related, isn't it? And it's money. We quite quickly revert to, look how much money we could save you. Or if you let procurement do this, look how good we are at negotiating. Or we could run some tenders, and it's all that measurable stuff that we'd fall back on to justify why an organisation who's employed a procurement team should use the procurement team, rather than saying, setting our stall out early to say, we're a procurement team, we're here, we're part of your organisation. We're going to help the organisation thrive. So we're going to deliver. We're going to deliver on risk management. We're going to build great relationships. We're going to bring more innovation in. We're going to really drive the brand. We're going to do all this stuff. Oh, and by the way, we'll probably save some money as we go. But it seems whenever procurement has that conversation with the CFO, they think the CFO wants to hear. So that's the first thing they lead with, and then they don't hear anything else after that. After that point,
it is a really good point, and it's one that I thought about a lot, especially over this sort of last 18 months. It's like a safety net, right? Like procurement, it's so easy to just say, actually, we're here to cut costs, and cost is kind of the primary focus. But your point there around, we could do all of these other things, and we should be doing all of these other things, because if we're not, we're probably going to let costs seep in from, like you mentioned, risk management. If we don't manage risks, well, something's bound to happen at some point that will cost more money than whatever we've saved on that contract value. I've also been thinking about the CFO, sort of just going back to your point of most procurement people, where do they report? To the CFO. And that is my experience as well. Sometimes in ops, but normally they're very closely aligned to that CFO. I think the conversation kind of what you're alluding to as well is it kind of needs to come out of these procurement bubbles, and procurement needs to be talking with internally within their own organizations how they can better do things, but probably in places and forums like LinkedIn or Twitter is talk to more of these other types of people across the business and really try and figure out what they're interested in. I've been speaking to a few CFOs, and there's one CFO on a platform called Substack. He's on LinkedIn as well, called CJ, and we've been chatting a bit. And it's just really interesting to see his perspectives, because you suddenly realize actually they don't just care about cost, but if we're only going to offer up that we can reduce cost, of course, they're just going to take it, right? Does this take a strong sort of vision from a procurement leader or multiple people all the way down, sort of the hierarchy in a procurement team to make this happen? Like, I'm just trying to think, like, how do we get around this kind of issue that we're presented with, which is a lot of good insular conversations within procurement communities and groups, but it kind of isn't going anywhere outside of that.
Yeah, keep talking. I was going to say stop talking to yourselves, but no, keep talking, and keep generating that feel within the procurement bubble. I wonder if we're just not confident enough in it to have actually gone out and had that conversation wider. In that we want to do it, we think we've got the skills to do it. Are we? Can we say we're delivering it? And perhaps we're retreating to things that we know that we can deliver and that we have delivered and it's proven already, rather than being a bit more audacious in our goals and saying, actually, well, we haven't delivered this, but we could, and let's go after it. Is there something that we feel we need to deliver first before we message? But I think we just need to be brave and start having those conversations wider. Even on LinkedIn, I would say it's a great network and there's some great procurement people on there, but it's very much procurement people. So, in that network, having that conversation. So I guess it is, how do we expand out of there on those platforms? So there is a CFO reading a post about procurement they're reading the post about all the great stuff that procurement does. So then they might be asking the question in their organization, is my procurement team doing that?
We certainly need to involve the finance CFO team into conversations. I really liked your point there about, like, keep talking about these things openly, keep talking about these things in these communities, because if the CFO does see it, that they can then go and make some critical thinking decisions within their own business. That could be a really good way to open this up. I still just wonder if the way I'm looking at this is that all of these other responsibilities that we've kind of spoken about, or things that procurement teams are doing, if we're not talking to people within our business to say that we are doing it, I just think that they're for one, never going to know. But we're always going to be bombarded by these other things emerging, whether it's, like you said, relationship management, risk management, sustainability, ESG, making sure people are paid fairly in the supply chain visibility. That we could do a list, 20, 30 more points here. And these things are happening, and procurement are kind of just picking them up at the moment and getting on with it. But I don't think they're doing a good enough job internally in saying, actually, we're doing all of this stuff and we're also saving money for the business, but we're doing all of these other things to stop things happening that are bad, whether that's bringing on a supplier that has some form of modern slavery within. So maybe it's exploiting female workers somewhere in the supply chain, wherever it is. I just think that we're doing these things already. We're not doing a good enough job of explaining internally and then potentially getting the back end to go do more of it.
Yeah, I think, that is a good point, because part of rebranding is about how you communicate your brand as well. I do think there's a bit of sort of like internal in the procurement department looking at yourselves to say, actually, what do we stand for? What is it we want to deliver? What do we want to believe in? What's the message we want to give? So, so we've got a clear message and a clear brand. And then it's sort of like ripples from there. We've got real allies within the business who, some of the things that as procurement professionals we want to deliver, it's embedded in people's day jobs. So if you have an ethics and sustainability team, which we do, working with them really closely, what's their goals? How do they want to achieve them? Well, they can't achieve them without procurement's input, because scope 3 emissions, for example, that's
all in the supply chain, right?
All your supply chain, yeah. So you need procurement support in doing that, rather than waiting for someone to come and say what you're doing. Go and approach those teams. This is, I've got really good relationships with the ethics and sustainability team, and that we're now doing workshops together, joint workshops to identify what does the supply chain, what's the visibility in our supply chain, what's key to us around net zero, raw materials, human rights within that supply chain, and how are we going to develop out to have absolute certainty, like you say, that there's no modern slavery in our supply chain, that we are paying fairly, that our carbon emissions are being managed by the suppliers as well. And so that's great. We've got kind of a joint mission that we're on there with the ethics and sustainability team. But equally, I think, having a great relationship with internal audit. And I know there's lots of procurement people who shudder when they hear internal audit. And I just go, yes, internal audit.
Part and parcel now, right? Like, yeah.
Because they're great. They're great allies as well, because, they're identifying areas for improvement that as a procurement department, you can help the business solve. So it's not necessarily the audit on your own procurement team, but the audits across the business as a whole. So if you understand actually what are the outstanding audit actions and which ones can I help resolve, which ones can I help influence? If the resilience team has an audit action which involves the management of suppliers, well, I can help you deliver that. So go and have those conversations and look for opportunities to really talk about the things you do.
That point on audit is really interesting that you welcome it in that way, because I've kind of in the past, I kind of don't like them, but really do like them at the same time. And one thing that they're normally very good at is getting rid of blind spots for you, because we can get very insular, and that's across any team. So that's why I always think those internal audits are so powerful, because it can pick up areas where maybe you're not doing so well, and also across the business where the rest of the business isn't doing so well. But your point there as well as working with your ethics team, is that like one of the main benefits of potentially like rebranding procurement from sort of more of a cost cutting, cost saving only function to doing more and more of this, wider piece, especially around sustainability, scope 3, modern slavery? Is that one of the main big benefits here of you're absolutely certain, as much as with the work you're doing, that none of that is happening in your supply chain and your business is aligned in that goal?
Yeah, it's a massive opportunity. It's a big benefit. It should be a benefit to all organisations. But working at John Lewis Partnership, it's in our DNA that we are, treating our supply chain well. So if we're not upholding that within our indirects and as well as our directs, that's not good. It's really key to the partnership as a whole, which is great, because as a procurement professional, I think it's really important. So there's a real opportunity for alignment there. But there's a massive opportunity for procurement to come forward, not necessarily as the expert, but as a partner to help deliver around ESG, because ESG is, there's more and more focus on ESG in all companies now. So if you're not having those conversations, there's a massive opportunity, because there's a gap. A lot of the forums I've been on recently talking about ESG measurements, how do we move forward and how are we going to be successful? It's an unknown space which procurement could step into. And I do think that's a big area. If we were to, rebrand to move away from cost savings, why not get on that ESG vehicle to help us deliver that? And for me, what I love about that is it's all core procurement skills around understanding your supply base, having good relationships with your supply base, being, fair, open, transparent with the way that you do business. All really good procurement principles that play really well into that area.
You were just talking about how it's a big opportunity with ESG for procurement to step into that. But I think maybe you were you just finishing up there though? I think you were.
Yeah, I was just. Did you get? I was just talking about the core skills of procurement, which
yeah, that's it. Yeah, no, that I got myself. It was only just for like 10 seconds there. I was like, oh, he's definitely good Scott. It's not an issue. Like we would have picked it up. I'm going to ask you, maybe we're going to throw a curveball question in here. And if this is a disaster, we can absolutely edit out. But it is on this theme of ESG, sustainability, scope 3, all of that under the bundle of sustainability. I've seen a lot of commentary around the future chief sustainability officers, and it's very likely that, and there are already those roles in the C-suite in some organizations. Looks like it's going to become potentially a more common or more normal C-suite role, that this could be a stepping stone for procurement leadership to kind of get away from the sort of the procurement language and to go into a chief sustainability officer role. But the main question I was going to ask as part of this rebranding of procurement is, does the word procurement do whatever it is we're doing or should be doing or want to be doing? Does it do it justice? So is the word procurement holding us back in any way?
I'm so glad you asked that, because this is something that I've been thinking about for quite a long time. What does procurement mean? The first question you asked me is, explain your job to a 5-year-old. I should be able to say I work in procurement, shouldn't I?
And they just know it, right? People should just know what that is. It shouldn't need a definition to accompany it.
Exactly. And as I said, my wife, well, obviously, I've worked in procurement for 35 years. My wife and I, we've been together for 33 of those years. So she's been with me all the way along my procurement career. And she said, yeah, I don't know what you do.
Yeah, I've had similar conversations.
But also, I think the word procurement has connotations, of people's experience of procurement. And it'll be different in every organisation. When you talk externally, and what's your view on procurement? When I've started new roles in new organisations, that's one of the questions you ask is, what's your net promoter score of procurement? Yeah. What's your opinion of procurement? What do you think they do well, and what do you think they could do better? Quite often the feedback's not great, is it?
It's normally awful. Actually, just do you think a lot of procurement professionals ask that question in their interviews? I've normally always asked, like, what's the view of procurement internally, wherever I've been, whether it's consulting, or I just wonder if people do, if that is the norm in asking. But I agree with you. It's not normally very pleasant.
That's interesting. When you're interviewing, you're desperate to get the job. If I'm honest, a lot of the jobs that I've gone into, the role that I've had has been brought in because procurement hasn't been
great,
performing well, or isn't well. Yeah. So, we need to shake the procurement team up again. But then, we shake the procurement team up by saying, oh yeah, this team's going to save you X amount. So it's like, it's a definition of madness, isn't it? We do the same thing over and over again. Does the name procurement sort of like hold you back a little bit from stepping into those new areas because of people's previous experience? And when I started work, and actually quite a way into my career, I was working in purchasing departments. And then this term procurement came in, and there is definitely, I think there probably is a bit of a stigma around the word procurement for people outside of the procurement profession.
I can recall when I was going for my grad role, which was a commercial role, and it was split into two areas, procurement and effectively legal. And I was mainly interested originally in the legal element and the contract element. And I was like, what on earth is procurement? Like, I looked on Wikipedia and it was like buying services and goods for business. And I was like, oh, so it's just buying, right? Like, and it just felt like a very complex way of saying it. And then as I got in, I really like your point that you mentioned purchasing. There's almost like an internal elitism within the profession, which are bundled like procurement and purchasing into, that procurement is so much vastly better than purchasing, because purchasing effectively just covers RFQs, go get a quotation, buy some stuff, maybe use a credit card to buy it, or send an invoice, and you kind of don't worry about anything else. And I find it really weird. Anyway, that kind of weird artificial separation. But then, yeah, just on the word procurement, everywhere I've been, I've introduced myself as, oh, I'm in procurement, or I've come in to do this within the procurement side. And like, you just see their faces drop instantly. And very similar to you, like a lot of the roles I've had over the last 5 years was fundamentally because a procurement team was underperforming or not getting by underperforming. A lot of the time it was, we don't have the right relationships in the business, as opposed to not saving enough money, or we can't get people to use our processes, or our processes are so vastly complicated that no one knows how to even start a request to procure or to buy or to get something that they need. Can you help? Yeah, I just think the word procurement has it does in places hold us back. I look over across the sea and see what the US sort of procurement professionals are doing. And a lot of those teams aren't called procurement. They're like sourcing teams or contract management teams. My last role, I wasn't in a procurement team. I was in a supplier management team. And that was it was one of the questions I asked in my interview. Why is it called supplier management, not procurement? Because everywhere else I've been, this is kind of like a procurement role. And then they said negative connotations of what procurement. Yeah. I don't have the answer, and I was just intrigued to see your view as well. But the kind of where my brain is going with this is that procurement is holding back. Procurement as a profession, it kind of limits us as to what we can deliver. But I don't have a magic wand answer as to what we should be calling ourselves. I do kind of like the supplier management piece as a name, or just focusing, vendor management. I think is a really good term as well, as opposed to procurement. That's kind of, I think, like quite a soft way to change it. And it's a way that I guess over the last few years, I've kind of warmed to quite significantly, despite using procurement. This podcast is called Procurement Reimagined for a reason. And it may be that we reimagine the procurement out of the podcast title. No, so yeah, thanks for answering the curveball question.
Yeah, I think it's, my job title is Procurement Lead, Supply Management. I had an interesting talk from Simon Gill from Proxima this week, and he was talking about the different aspects of procurement: the tech aspect, the sourcing aspect, the contract management aspect, the supply relationship management. It got me thinking when he was sort of segmenting it like that. Like, there's a procurement team, but there's very specific roles within that procurement team. Obviously, depending on the scale of the team.
Yes, certainly. In smaller teams, it's one person does all of those, or everyone does all of those, right? But yeah, it's good to segment it out. Yeah.
And I know, I've worked in teams where I was procurement. That was it.
Yeah.
So you did all of that. In a larger team, you do have that, different roles, different skill sets to deliver those different aspects as well. And, just thinking when you're saying, should it be procurement, should it be supply management, should it all sit in procurement? Mm-hmm. Should it be sort of like carved out a little bit so that we don't bundle
decentralize it.
Yeah, from requisition through sourcing, through contract management, through to supply relationship management. Is it right that all sits in one place? I know it's horses for courses, really, isn't it? Because it depends a lot on what the organisation needs from those aspects.
Yeah, that last sentence is probably the most important point, isn't it? Here, really, it's like, what does the organisation need? And then it's like, is this traditional model of how we do procurement going to enable it or prevent it? And I think my view is fundamentally, like, at the moment, I think it is holding it back, regardless of what that view is of the business. But this is a super difficult topic. So I'm glad we're kind of just talking it through here, because I don't have the answers. I'll be really intrigued, anyone listening, as to whether they also want to come talk about this, because I think it is a fundamental point. Your point as to whether procurement, who houses all of these different areas, is that the right thing for it to do? And whether it should be, whether broken up or separated or moved around. I think there could be something good there that could come out of that. But I don't necessarily, like we said, we don't necessarily have the answers here, but I think this is the type of conversation, especially being a Procurement Reimagined podcast, that we should be brave enough to have, because I think we do need change in the space. Well, perhaps I'll just kind of move away from the rebranding side now. And you've kind of covered this a little bit. The one question I wanted to kind of just tie all of this together is you said you've been doing procurement for 35 years. Your wife's seen 33 years of that as well of your career. What's like one big change you've seen in that time from Gary 35 years ago to Gary now? Like, what are you seeing in the space that you could say, actually, that's so fundamentally changed, that it's so vastly different now?
Well, I mean, tech, definitely in that time.
Yeah.
I think back to my first role, I worked for the company that did the distribution for McDonald's.
Oh, wow, okay.
They also baked the buns and made cola. So you're too young to remember McDonald's own cola before McDonald's.
Oh, that was a thing, right? That's amazing. I want to try some.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
That's incredible.
And the root beer. Oh, that was just disgusting.
What? This is life-changing news right for me right now. I'll be completely honest. Root beer at McDonald's sounds incredible.
That was my first role, and I was, working in the purchasing department. We were a centralized purchasing department. I remember when I started, my boss said to me, "Yeah, we keep going through these cycles every 7 years. We centralize it, we decentralize it, and I guess pace. That's the other thing. Technology and pace have changed. Because he said, every 7 years we change. Well, now it's not every 7 years we change, is it? It's constant change. We're just getting used to a world now of, well, this might be what it is this week, but could be something different next week. You've got to go with it. But those purchase orders that I raised, I took requisitions on carbon copy paper.
Yeah, the free layer stuff, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And maybe this is slightly concerning because I only started in procurement in 2015, and in 2017 I was doing that.
Wow! Oh my gosh!
And in a multi-billion pound company. So
really.
Anyway, I'll let you keep telling your story. So
this is an funny story. Yeah, because when I normally talk to people about carbon copy paper, they say, "What? What's that?"
That's the only reason I know what it is, because in what other aspect of my life will I come across it? Oh, in a procurement role, like that.
Yeah. So I take the requisition, raise the purchase order in what was lovingly called a dumb terminal. Because, which it was really great for your self-esteem to say that you spent all day working on a dumb terminal. It's like, okay, brilliant. And so I'd raise the purchase order number. Then I would have to go to the telex machine. Now, I'm sure you haven't worked on one of these, Daniel.
You lost me now.
Right. So the telex machine, you would dial the number that you're connecting with, and you would type out the order, and it'd be like a typewriter, and it'd be punching out the order on your side, and it would also be punching out the order on the other side. So that's the way you sent purchase orders. Then the fax machine arrived in the office. Oh my God, it was a life changer. I mean, my typing skills never been great. On our telex machine as well, if you made a mistake, it was really hard. You couldn't delete it. You'd made the mistake and you had to...
It's there.
It was very stressful. But fax machine was like life changing because I could now write my orders and send them, but that was a real challenge because my handwriting has never been great. So I quite often get people phone me and say, what is it you've ordered? Then obviously email came in. Technology has really changed in that area, is what I say, and it's in the communication area, really, isn't it? It's how do you communicate those aspects. I spent quite a chunk of my working life working at a software developer who developed P2P systems. So during the 90s, I was part of that journey of moving things forward and introducing cataloging. That was a great experience for me because I'd see from the point of speaking to the client about what their needs are, telling them what the best practice was, helping them implement their systems, etc. And from 88 to the late 90s, there was big shifts in P2P. And then it kind of all stopped. And the reason it all stopped was because of the millennium bug. Because no one was developing systems, everyone was testing systems. And people say that was a big hoo-ha about nothing. It wasn't. It was real. The millennium bug was real. All these systems were going to fall over if you didn't have dedicated people testing them and fixing them so that they could roll over from their 2-digit year to a 4-digit year. I think there's been a bit of a gap in the technology development for P2P systems since those late 90s. Now, again, it feels like it's really moving on again, doesn't it? Right? It's like, it absolutely, incredibly. So, I wouldn't, so the 18-year-old in 1988 would not recognize technology as it is today.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I've been following sort of the Cooper stuff a little bit, and it felt like there was, and this is almost looking through a lens of history for me in kind of it, because I was a kid when all of this, what you've just described, I wasn't born for some of it, and then I was a young kid. It kind of felt like the technology in a space got to a set point, and then for 10 to 14 years kind of stalled. And then 2017 picked up again because there was a bit more excitement in the space. Some big money was spent with some tech providers. And then COVID has really vastly demonstrated the fragility in some areas of just not having the right data or processes or a million other things. And now it's just like, if I even, like I said, I was doing the carbon paper requisitions at one point, for just a few weeks, I may add, because I got rid of that very quickly there. I was like, This is not how we do this. Not to say that the system of just doing it via email was any better, but it was. It has so vastly changed just in I would say the last 2-3 years. Like I can imagine myself working at a tech company, right? To talk about procurement in the space. So no, that's really cool. Really nice to hear. I'm going to look up some of the stuff you mentioned and add some of that into the show notes, because I just want to have a look at some of that stuff as well. I get a visual on what was the machine that you were using to punch in?
Telex.
I'm going to have to go and I'll have a look after this call to see what that looks like. I can't even imagine it. Gary, we're going to move on to like 4 closing questions. These are just like quick fire, short form. You can answer them however you want. And I just kind of set the reason we ask these is because we have every month at the moment over 1,000 people, about 1,000 listens of these episodes, which is kind of wonderful as a new podcast. And there's a lot of people across the world in different kinds of procurement, contract management roles. And everyone does stuff so vastly different, or they've got a certain approach in their business. And we're just trying to see, like, how do people do things? So maybe the first question I ask is, how many contracts do you manage at the moment?
So can I say how many suppliers we have first? Because I think that puts it into perspective.
Yeah, do that. Yeah.
So we have in the region of 3,000 suppliers. Just to put that into perspective, that's across 2 retail brands. Yeah. We have a farm, we have hotels, and we have financial services and head offices. We've done quite a job of reducing those down from around 6,500. So we're at 3,000 at the moment in the regional. Now, the vast majority of the spend with those suppliers is across about 500 suppliers. More than 90% of our spend is with 500 suppliers. That's where we concentrate our contracting effort, around those 500. So in that kind of region, 500 contract. Others are on real short form or purchase order terms.
Yeah, no, that's a really sensible way. When you said 3,000, I was just like, instantly I was like, oh, that's quite a lot. And I was like, well, that doesn't sound like a lot, given I'm aware of just the sheer vastness of your organization. That's incredible. I've seen organizations that have way more than that are smaller. I've worked in some organizations in government that have close to that, and that's just in one tiny part. I'm kind of laughing to myself because that can be a particularly messy area. Gary, what's one piece of tech, software, hardware that you could not live without? And
as frustrating as it can be, video conferencing. Now, I would never have said that pre-COVID, because I don't think I've done one video conferencing call pre-COVID. But now I just couldn't live without it. The relationship building that you can do, the networking, it's incredible.
That's a really good answer. No one's answered that, by the way, so, like that. A lot of people said phones. You're the first person to mention that. And now just your point, like I think I did the odd Skype call to people, family members maybe. I don't even know if Skype's a thing anymore. I don't hear about it. But yeah, it's a really good point actually.
Skype were in pole position, weren't they? They were in the pole position while we're all talking about Zoom and
the Zoom domination, and now Microsoft Teams resurgence. It's a really interesting space for sure, especially between those two. No, that's really interesting, Gary. That's a really good one actually. And the weirdest question that I will ever ask anyone in procurement is: imagine I'm your procurement genie. What's your one procurement wish that I can grant?
So whether we continue to call ourselves procurement or not, but my one wish from the genie would be that when I say when someone asks me, where do you work? And I say I work in procurement, they say, that's really interesting. That must be so exciting. And I really understand what that is you do. And you're making such a difference to the planet, in the work you do. You're making a difference to people, to organizations. I get it. I really get what you do. Well done. That would be my wish.
That's amazing, actually. I'm with you. I think I'm going to steal that as my answer to this question, because like you were saying to your wife about your wife, that she still doesn't really understand. Like I have conversations with my partner, and she's at one stage of my career, I couldn't tell her anything because of like working in government, in defense, Official Secrets Act. Couldn't tell her what I was doing. I was just be like, oh, I'm buying stuff and putting contracts in place for stuff and then making sure that stuff comes through. And that was like the only way I could say. I couldn't say like, oh, I just brought this, or we just brought this really exciting missile technology. Yeah. Or like that's as much as I could say. I couldn't go into any detail, and I still really can't. But like as I went through my like the last 5 years, she still was like, it just sounds so complex. Like why procurement? Like what was that word? So just to come back to that theme of like, is procurement the right word, the right description for this profession? Yeah, it's a good question, but I really like that answer. But Gary, thanks so much for joining. We actually ran really long. We were just talking, weren't we, before this? It was like, I was asking if you have a bit of extra time. We had a bit of issue getting in. Well, I had a bit of issue getting into my own recording studio on Riverside. But no, this has been a super fun conversation, and I appreciate you coming on.
No, I really appreciate you inviting me, Daniel. And I'm a big fan of your content on LinkedIn, so I was chuffed when you said, could we have a conversation? And it's been great. I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome. No, I appreciate it, Gary. Thank you.